I don't remember. Plus the sound of my voice. She got lost somewhere between the scream and the howl, when the air entering my lungs ceased to be human. They say forgetting is a relief, but there's no rest in losing who you are. The moon taught me that. She doesn't punish. She simply reveals it. Before the curse, I had a name. Men called me king, the gods called me a fool. My throne was made of stone, cold as the hearts of those who rule without knowing the weight of their own power. But I wasn't bad, just curious. I wanted to understand why the gods considered themselves so different from us. They felt anger, desire, fear, everything they called human weakness. And yet they demanded that we bow down before them. Back then, the world was young and fire was still a relatively recent invention. The winds carried the scent of the sacrifice to the temples, and in return the gods sent silence. Silence, as if the absence of a response were power itself. I decided to break this silence. I wanted to see if Zeus bled. I wanted to see if a god could feel disgust or regret, so I prepared a banquet. The meats were carefully selected, and the wine was the purest nectar stolen from the altars. I summoned Zeus himself to my table, and when he descended, enveloped in lightning and arrogance, I served him the dish that would seal my fate. Human flesh, not from an enemy, but from someone who was dear to me, a son, a sacrifice I didn't ask for but accepted, because I wanted a divine response, not pity. The thunder came before the disgust. The god's eyes became like abysses, and the wine turned to blood before me. Not a word was spoken. Only silence, the same silence I had defied. And then the punishment, not with fire, not with death, but with something worse, transformation. I felt my body twitch, but it wasn't physical pain. It was as if my spirit had been ripped out and stitched back together in fury. My bones reminded me of what it was to be a man, but my blood screamed for flesh. My face stretched, my skin cracked, and what emerged from me was no longer me. That was the answer I had asked for. Zeus doesn't bleed, but he makes others bleed for him. The forest welcomed me like a tomb. The smell of the earth was sweet and rotten, and the moon seemed to laugh at me up there, reflected in the pools of blood that the ground held. I ran, not because I wanted to run away, but because something inside me needed to hunt. Each step was like a drum beating inside my chest, marking the rhythm of the beast that had awakened. I heard voices, distant laughter, the echoes of the gods watching the spectacle of my ruin. The first howl escaped without me noticing. It was a pure, wild, free sound, and at the same time terribly human. In that scream I understood what I had lost, the ability to choose. Now I was no longer the king who had defied the heavens, nor the man who loved his own pride. I was just hungry. Hunger and remembrance. The centuries have passed over me like waves crashing over a rock. Time has lost its meaning, and pain has become the only faithful companion. I've seen empires rise and fall, and in every one of them, men trying to repeat my mistake, seeking the power of the gods, playing with the sacred, offering what they love in exchange for answers. And in each generation the curse spread like an echo. They called me a legend, a monster, a warning. But I am none of them. I am simply what remains when curiosity overcomes fear. Sometimes, on the coldest nights when the wind cuts like a blade and the moon is too full, I hear the sound of what I once was. I see a man standing before the mirror-like surface of the water, his face tired, his eyes empty. For a moment I almost recognized him. But then the surface breaks and the reflection dissolves into hairs and shadows, and I realize that that man died a long time ago, devoured by his own desire to know. The following centuries were filled with silence. With each full moon, the curse reminded me of who I was and what I could never be again. There was no temple, no prayer, and not enough blood to appease the hunger. And the worst part is that deep down I still loved the moon, because she was the only witness to what was left of me. She saw everything, the monster and the man, and yet she shone indifferent like a goddess who never forgot the original crime. Over time, I realized that the curse was not punishment, but a mirror. The gods wanted me to see in them the reflection of my own mistake. They turned me into a beast not to destroy me, but to teach me what it means to be human, the weight of choice, the pain of desire. And the more I resisted, the deeper the mirror became. There was no escape. The moon always found me, even in the darkest caves. She didn't need to look for me. She lived inside me. I began to understand the cycle. The transformation came not only from the moon, but from repentance. Every time I remembered, my body reacted. Each memory was a scar that reopened, and I bled silently, without visible wounds. Because the blood of the curse is not red. It's a memory. The men started hunting me. They called me a demon, a legend, an abomination. And in every village I visited, I saw in their eyes the same mixture of fear and fascination that I had felt before the gods. They wanted to understand. They wanted to see the monster. But when they looked for too long, they saw themselves reflected in me. And that terrified them more than any claw or howl. I was a reminder that the line between man and beast is merely a comfortable illusion. In the early ages, I tried to speak, but my voice no longer obeyed. What came out of me was a broken sound, something between crying and roaring. The language of men has abandoned me, and with it came the forgetting of tenderness. But within the pain, I found something that not even the gods could take away: conscience. I knew who it was, and that was the real punishment. Sometimes, on nights when the wind carries the scent of rain and blood, I remember Zeus. I imagine him sitting on his throne of clouds, observing the world with disdain. I wonder if he still remembers me, or if my existence is just a lost echo amidst the thunder. But perhaps he smiled, satisfied with what he had done. Because in transforming me, he created something that gods never were, imperfect and eternal. Time became a veil, and behind it, I saw the world change. Men built cities, temples, borders, and forgot the gods they feared. But in each new era, something of me seeped into the shadows. In the stories told around the fire, in the whispered superstitions, in the fear of what dwells in the night. They didn't know my name, but they felt my presence, and I watched, silent, like a hungry ghost still waiting for absolution. I discovered that the curse has an echo. When the moon touches the heart of a man who feels anger and guilt in equal measure, something awakens within him. It's not my will, it's a reflection of the same fire that once consumed me. I've seen warriors on battlefields transform hatred into teeth and claws. I've seen betrayed lovers feel the fury grow beneath their skin until their souls screamed. And each time that happened, I heard a new howl on the horizon, an ancient calling, a reminder of punishment that never ended. They called me Dad, but I never asked for children. Still, each new werewolf was a fragment of my guilt scattered throughout the world. Some fought against the curse, trying to hide in the forests, praying for forgiveness. Others embraced the chaos, letting the blood speak for them. And I, caught between the man and the beast, watched, unable to interfere. Because a curse cannot be taught, it can only be inherited. The moon, my eternal jailer, was also my confidant. On nights when the sky opened up in silver, I would talk to her. He told stories of when the world was still pure, of when the gods walked among us. She never answered, but sometimes the wind would change direction, and I felt that she could hear me. It was a bitter consolation, like the cold touch of a hand that no longer exists. One night I heard human footsteps approaching. They were slow, steady, filled with courage or madness. A man entered the clearing carrying a torch and an iron cross. He was trembling, but not from fear. It was hatred. I knew him, not him personally, but his gaze. The same look I had when I challenged Zeus. The gaze of someone who thinks they can control what they don't understand. He spoke in the name of God, asking that I return to dust. But what dust could receive me, if even the earth no longer recognized me? When I stepped forward, the torch wavered and I saw terror glisten in his eyes. Not because I saw myself as a monster, but because I saw the reflection of my own despair. The flame fell and the fire ran through the grass. The man fled, and the smell of smoke mingled with that of the wet forest. At that moment I realized I no longer needed teeth to hurt. It was enough to simply exist. The following centuries brought new beliefs, new names, but the fear remained the same. The moon was still rising, and in each village someone was telling the same story in different voices. In some I was a demon sent from hell. In other versions he was a protector of the forest, an ancestral spirit who punished the wicked. The truth got lost among the legends, and I became all of them. And maybe at some point I started to like it. Because while the gods needed temples and prayers, I lived in the very veins of human fear. I was remembered, even when they didn't know why. And a being who is remembered never truly dies. That was both my punishment and my reward. But even eternity is not constant. On an ancient night, so silent that even the wind seemed to hold its breath, I saw something different. A woman was walking among the trees. She didn't run away, she didn't tremble, she didn't pray. His eyes held the same gleam as the moon, a cold, curious, almost merciful light. When he saw me, he didn't back away. He simply said, "You still carry the burden of the gods." And at that moment, I realized that she saw beyond the flesh. Her name was Selene, and her voice was the opposite of thunder. She promised neither redemption nor feared what I was. He simply said that every curse is born from a wish that has been granted too often. And perhaps what I was seeking was not forgiveness, but oblivion. I wanted to believe. But the moon, a silent witness, seemed to be laughing at us both. Selene disappeared as mysteriously as she appeared. Some say she was a fallen goddess, others that she was just a woman dreaming of the impossible. But what she left behind was more profound than any divine touch: doubt. For the first time in ages, I doubted the necessity of pain. And for a brief moment I thought that perhaps I could break the cycle. I tried to resist the moon. I waited for night to fall and refused the call. I closed my eyes, held my breath, and begged for the blood to be still. But the moon doesn't ask, it commands. And when I opened my eyes, the transformation came with more fury than ever. My body tore apart, my bones remembered what they were, and the beast roared inside me, as if avenging my attempt at freedom. At that moment, I realized that the worst prison is the one you try to deny. After that night, I never sought redemption again. I learned to walk between worlds, to be a shadow among men, to accept eternity as part of myself. And over time, I realized something both terrible and beautiful. The world was becoming more like me. Men have learned to devour each other for power, to hide their instincts under masks of civilization. They no longer needed the moon to transform. All it took was the desire. Today, as I walk through the streets of the cities that have grown up over the forests that were once mine, I hear the same sounds: hurried footsteps, held breaths, hungry hearts. The moon reflects in the windows of the buildings as it once reflected in the ancient rivers, and I realize that it has never left me. Perhaps she has simply found new disciples. I am the first, but I am not the last. I am the warning, the reflection, the whisper in humanity's throat when it dreams of power. Because the wolf never sleeps, it only waits for the moment when man calls it by name. And when the moon rises, he will come, not to punish nor to devour, but to remember that within every soul lies a remnant of corrupted divinity, yearning for liberation. I was king, I was monster, I was legend. Now I am merely what remains when the silence of the gods becomes flesh. And every time the wind blows through the trees, I hear it calling my forgotten name. Not the name of the man I was, but the name of the beast I have become. And in that sound I find a strange peace, because after all, the curse was never a prison. It was a response.